Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 13th of July 2022. I hope you all had a wonderful spell of Eid. There was also the spell of monsoon that created havoc, and this is going to be our leading story today. The monsoon rains and the effects that they've had on the entire country, the number of casualties, the infrastructure damage, and of course, whether it be in Karachi, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Balochistan, rain has caused a lot of damage and a lot of loss of lives as well. What needs to be now, the maneuvering by the government and the agencies, we know that the National Disaster Management Authority is up there 24/7, so are our armed forces, so is the government. They are trying their level best, but what needs to be the measures taken for prevention of such issues in the future? This is going to be our first story. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the crisis that has engulfed Sri Lanka. We know that Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled the country. He's arrived in another country, and apparently he's going to go to a third country from there. There are protests countrywide. People have entered the different residential compounds of the Premier, and they are demanding for the current Prime Minister, who is President Wickremesinghe, to also resign. They say that there needs to be a new government into place. Nevertheless, there's a lot of crisis-like situation, not only political but also economic. There is a lack of food, there is a lack of medical facilities, a lack of fuel. A lot of people are burning wood as we speak to warm things up or to make their food. This and more will be discussed in our second segment. Then we'll be talking about a huge spate of galaxies that has been shown through the James Webb Space Telescope. It has released its next wave of images on Tuesday, and this has heralded a new era as far as astronomy is concerned. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson says every image is a new discovery, and this will give humanity a new view of the universe as we've never seen before. You need to see these images to believe that they are real. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to talk about the COVID-19 statistics as far as today is concerned. The positivity ratio has gone down a bit, 1.55%. Patients of critical care are present there. Nevertheless, the government asks everybody to stay vigilant. The World Health Organization has also talked about it. It says is that the pandemic is not near over at all. A lot of countries are grappling with the new wave of COVID-19 because of the BA4 and BA5 variants. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns rain, monsoon, and the havoc that it has caused as far as lives are concerned, as far as infrastructural damage is concerned. A lot of reports that we've received from different parts of the country, whether it be Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, or Sindh, have been the worst affected, also Punjab. We've been joined by Momme Saleem, who's a leading environmentalist, to talk about this. Momme, thank you very much to have joined us, and Guzishta Eid Mubarak to you and your loved ones as well. As far as this current crisis is concerned, post-monsoon, we more or less see that every year. But in 2020, we saw a real bad spate as far as Karachi is concerned, and now Karachi has again more or less seen a relapse of that. Why has this happened over a period of 2 years? Why have the authorities not done the needful, or are the authorities it is not possible for them to do the needful because of the current infrastructure in Karachi? All right, so we are talking about the rains and the monsoon season that has caused havoc across the Pakistan. 10 have been killed in rain-related incidents in Karachi, 6 each in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan, 5 in Gilgit-Baltistan. The National Disaster Management Authority has been authorized by the Prime Minister and also the provincial authorities by him to prepare for the next spell. The Met Office has warned of a new spell of rains on its way from the 14th to the 17th of July. That is starting from tomorrow and going on for the next 3 days. Flash floods have also caused havoc to crops in Swabi, in Dera Ismail Khan, in Tank, Naushera, Malakand, and also many scores of houses, hundreds of houses have been washed away by overflowing river Winder. Momme Saleem joins us online. Momme, can you hear us properly now?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. So I said, Walaikum Assalam and Eid Mubarak to you too, Omar, and thank you very much for inviting me over. Well, to the question that you put forward, very unfortunate that on Eid day we had to kind of see such havoc, which was a calamity. And we all know the reason behind this is climate change, because at the end of the day, we all know that Pakistan is facing this problem for last 10 years. It has been topping the list, top 10 countries which have faced, the impacts of and the risks of climate change. And now we are looking at it in a way that it is translating into different disasters every year. Karachi more so because there, of course, it is part of climate change, but part of also how much you're prepared. Yes, we have less resources, but when it comes to local administration, I always say that our urban planning is very, very, not in a good shape. We keep on kind of expanding cities and we do not think about the drain. We don't think about many things which can pose serious threats like this one. And now we need to build a resilient infrastructure more so because of the climate change. And we don't have those resilient infrastructures. Rather, we are burdening the existing infrastructure so much that we are putting the lives of our people under threat. And in Pakistan, of course, these torrential rains are now occurring every year. And that is because we have warmer summers and, warm air has more moisture. And then you have this heavy rain, which is, according to scientific calculations, it is 100 mm in 24 hours that you have such, heavy rains. And we face these rains and due to lack of infrastructure, due to lack of proper drainage, due to lack of water storage infrastructure that we should have had in place, these things occur. So these are long-term solutions that need to be implemented. And now we are very late in this. This should have been done, earlier on. At the same time, I think, yeah.
Go ahead. You were saying.
Yeah. And I think part of it is also how much you make the community aware, because these are the same people who are investing into these urban infrastructures. They are making their house, they are buying land in different illegal housing societies and then building their houses there. So one has to kind of also educate these people. So this all has to be done at the government level, which unfortunately we have seen is not happening. Our NDMAs and our PDMAs have not been very active. They do symptomatic treatment, but they have to have, of course, resources allocated so that they can build such infrastructure, but they have to start thinking about policies in place. And I think Shadi Rahman, already the Minister for Climate Change, I mean, she actually did mention this. There was an article in the newspapers where she mentioned that, we will be facing urban flooding. So if the warning was there, then why weren't necessary steps taken? So that's a big question mark.
All right, speaking of question marks, 2 years back, Karachi was faced with more or less a same issue in 2020. There was urban flooding, the water had reached second floors of houses that were, even in the posh localities where normally water never reached from the flooding, but even those people were affected. At that time, the then government had announced huge, mechanisms in order to prevent such an event from happening again. Huge resources were allocated as well. What happened? Why 2 years down the lane we see exactly the same issue and even a more exacerbated situation? And I mean, we've seen the videos, you have seen them as well, that are going all over the social media. People who have themselves recorded how they cannot move properly, how the cars are submerged in water, the people are submerged in water. And that raises not only a huge risk as far as infrastructure is concerned that you've talked about, but also people's lives because of the electric short current.
That's true. Well, see, I mean, usually in Pakistan, we have excellent policies. We have excellent frameworks. But then when it comes to action and implementation, sometimes it is lack of resources which hinders.
Okay.
But at the same time, it is also lack of will at times which hinders, because it is all about prioritization. And developing countries have been kind of educating to the developed countries that we have many other issues in place and we cannot just prioritize these, of course, adaptation measures which we need to take. Why? Because we don't have enough resources, so they have to help us. But then there are things that we can do in our own capacity as well, which is to stop various activities which can lead to this. And as I mentioned earlier as well, to really kind of now, thoroughly check the illegal encroachments that have happened to the land. Because see, in Rawalpindi, for example, I learned it only yesterday that we have this infrastructure in place. It is an old infrastructure which has been converted into now groundwater recharge wells. This is very interesting. So all the water, because the water is so, I mean, it's such heavy rain that the ground cannot absorb this water in that little time. So they have actually, used that infrastructure, existing drainage infrastructure, which is now they're accumulating that water, and they use it for, of course, for giving water to all these, when we have them on the roadside and other things that they want to use that water for. So such infrastructure, if it is in place, they should start building it. And if you're saying 2 years before this was something, there was allocation, so by now they should have had some kind of system in place. Yeah, which could have prevented
that is true, Momme. And you talk about these small mechanisms that are in place, like the one in Rawalpindi, and I'm sure that can easily be achievable all across Pakistan. And all you need to do is drain the water properly into the right reservoir, so that not only is there no issue of flooding, but the same water from the rains can be reused, whether to make people drink or for other utilizations, such as for the crops as well. Can the government take short-term or long-term measures as far as this is concerned? And if so, how long does it take for these measures to be implemented in your point of view?
See, the immediate or short-term measures are, of course, bringing community together, making these early warning systems, and we already have these in place. It's not that we do not have early warning systems. That's why we got this statement from the minister. It's only that it has to be kind of communicated well to people. Secondly, people have to be trained, because unfortunately, Omar, in our schools also, we don't have training. We did a survey and we found out that disaster risk management, under that, children should be taught as to, if such things happen, what are they supposed to do. So this can save lives. But in long term, see, I mean, I would say that this is not even long term, this is medium term solution, where they should start building these infrastructures, because it is not because of these floods only. I'm saying this because Pakistan in another 2-3 years, due to climate change, will be facing droughts, and our underground water is going down. We need to recharge our underground water, and as you also said, we need to make these recharge wells so that this water can be reused, but also this can recharge the underground water. So we will have water scarcity. We already know in Karachi there's a lot of issue, but we need to kind of build these on war footings. And I mean, it would take similar time as any other infrastructure project. So it is only about starting it, because we will be facing this, and maybe more frequently in coming years, because during the year Pakistan has a lot of rainfall or no rainfall at all. So climate change is unpredictable. We have to kind of start building this infrastructure. Otherwise, we won't be able to kind of save our people from this.
Because, Momme, you very rightly said that either we're going to have no rains or a lot of rains, and we need to take full advantage of both. When there are no rains, we need to build as much of infrastructure as possible, so that when there are more rains, we can gather all that water together to be used by the people and by the crops as well. You talked about, water drainage, and that brings me to the waste management issue as far as Karachi and Lahore are concerned. That is also one of the reasons why water accumulates a lot in these two cities. What can be done as far as waste management is concerned?
We need to boost our circular economy. We already have economic issues, and we need to kind of really scale up these small initiatives, which many have taken now at private level, which is to say, to convert waste into resource. So the old myth of extracting resources and fueling it into the economic engine, that is no more valid even globally. So we need to kind of reuse our resources, and we need to kind of teach our people how to segregate waste at the source, and then only this can be reused into, you can make a lot of things out of it. For example, paper, you can reuse plastic, you can reuse organic waste, for example, but it has to be segregated somewhere. We have traditional segregators, but that does not end up into the kind of formal system that we would like to. So I think municipalities need to think about it, and they need to scale these small initiatives. And it doesn't have to be only public initiative. It could be public-private. Many of the countries
there needs to be a public-private initiative. The public, the government can't take everything on its own shoulders, can it?
Of course. And then, you can use the same waste for generating energy. Many of the countries are doing that. Singapore, for example, is doing that, and they have zero waste. And it is only about, of course, I always say 50% of the environmental problems are behavioral change, and 50% have to be invested under the government policies in changing the habits of people, how they look at. See, plastic ban was implemented. How many people are still, there are no fines now levied, so nobody is kind of following it in Islamabad also. So we have to kind of think about these little things, and this can also boost our economy. We have young people, 62%, give them money to start, have these startups which are based on circular economies. This waste is not waste. It is actually useful products that can be fueled into the economic engine, and new products could be made, and we could always earn a lot out of it. But unfortunately, that is also not happening.
Momme, you talked of encroachments. How can one deal with that? Because when you talk of encroachments, you talk of a lot of people who are now living in those encroachments. What kind of policies need to be put into place for that?
See, first of all, we need to have a land use policy, which we don't have. We need to have an urban management policy. We don't have that. And when we talk about encroachments, it is usually when we have these, because there's several departments that deal with buildings, and some of these for example, environmental agencies, they are just a tick mark on the paper. People consult them, the proponents of the project consult them, but they do not consult them to a level where they know that these problems occur afterwards. It is not that the EPAs are their enemy, but it is only that these projects have to go through that drill so that they know what are the repercussions they will have later on. So I think, first of all, this. Secondly, the government has to become proactive. Once in a blue moon, we see these lists being displayed on media that these are the illegal societies. But when the purchase and buying is happening, why doesn't the government authority step up and kind of go and stop these things from happening? Once they've started building, only then we see some action is being taken. I don't want to name names, but there are many big societies. We very well know they were illegally kind of constructed in a way. They just went and had this big land, and they started building a society, and then through various ways they were able to. So we have to kind of come out of these shortcuts, and we really have to think about these policies as something that is going to help us develop. It is not about this is not a tug of war between a government and a project proponent, but it is actually something important that has to be in place, and people have to follow. So I think the rules have to be strict, and the monitoring has to be strict. EPA does not have enough human resource. They need to be, they have to have more human, because they have to monitor these projects as well, and they are unable to do it. Hence, the encroachments happen. Even if they have taken approval for a certain project, they exceed that because there's no monitoring, personnel there. Why? Because EPA cannot just stretch themselves to a level that they go to each and every project to monitor. So I think it's a mixture of, I think, where we talk about policies, it's implementation, but when we break down implementation, it is about human resource, it is about strictly following it, it is about making it a crime rather than just calling, okay, they did not actually get the
and strict implementation of any abuse of such crime, whether it be in the form of not doing the needful as far as waste management is concerned. Little things, and when you implement those fines in letter and spirit, one person get the fine, that and through the word of mouth, the whole thing spreads that the government has become more stringent and people follow things more carefully. If that is the case, now you talked about changes as far as the management is concerned and the way the infrastructure is being built. What about urban planners and topography experts? Do you feel that we need to consult them as well as far as future planning of the big cities, and of course these encroachments are concerned? Maybe they could come up with solutions.
Indeed, there are several solutions. Of course, vertical growth is one of them. But at the same time, I think we need to build new cities. In Pakistan, we have the trend of expanding cities, which actually ends up into urban sprawl, and transportation becomes an issue, amenities become an issue, hospitals, everything becomes an issue. So it's important for us to really have small units of urban centers rather than, expanding them. So we need to make new cities. Islamabad is a good example of that. that a new city was kind of, of course it is a man-made city, but the way that it was a planned city, and the way it kind of came about, we saw that back in 60s people were forced to kind of move here,
True.
but then it is all for good, and now we see this also expanding to a level where we won't be able to control it, and we have similar issues at Lahore and Karachi. So we need to kind of stop it now, because the resources start depleting. You're just burdening those limited resources in a limited place. So we have, mashallah, a big country. We can always create new cities and kind of create new economic opportunities for people to move to those
Exactly,
cities.
but whenever
So
we
very,
create
very
something new, Momme, one thing that is very important is that we need to come up with a solution to these issues that are plaguing the current cities that become, for example, submerged in water during rains or have a huge waste management issues. Whatever is constructed now needs to be adherent to these new policies so as to save Pakistan from future effects of climate change, which brings me to the future spell of rains that are supposed to begin from tomorrow and will go on till the 17th. NDM has already warned all the cities, and there's a huge list of cities where the widespread rains are going to occur. What warning, what steps in your point of view as a citizen do you intend to tell people that they need to follow in order to prevent themselves, A, from getting electrocuted, B, from getting affected by this current spell of rains, whether in the urban areas or of course in the rural areas?
See, first of all, of course, it starts from within your home. You need to, of course, protect yourself and try to not, be on the lower ground. If you have a double story, then if you know that, your area is vulnerable, then you have to kind of keep a check on that. The other thing is, of course, to otherwise we know that we have this power cut, but then people need to. But Umar, here I would say an individual can do as much. But if we have the electric wiring system which is falling in the streets, people can't do much about it, unfortunately. But
they can remain in their homes, they can remain at certain elevated levels, not touch anything if their hands are wet or if the area is wet.
And if there is a possibility, and if government has already declared that area vulnerable to flood, then they preferably they should move out of it if they have that kind of possibility. But I think the government then has to give some kind of support to them, because people living, and usually it is, you said there are posh areas which are flooded as well, but then usually we see the poor areas are. So it's important that government kind of moves them out rather than waiting for some disaster to happen. So that has to be done. But with this, I would also say that, insurance is something globally also. Climate insurance is something that is being discussed as well. So I don't know how much can the government do in this regard, but then the local citizens where the areas are vulnerable, they should also have some kind of insurance, because they are going to lose their assets, they are going to lose their lives. So there should be insurance in place so that, this could be kind of prevented.
Thank you very much, Momme. Saleem, leading environmentalist, talking to us about the widespread rains, the monsoons, and the havoc that they have created across Pakistan, and what measures need to be taken in the short term, in the long term by the government. It's a public-private partnership issue that needs to be tackled with in the quickest of manners so as to prevent future loss of lives or infrastructure. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Sri Lanka and the state of emergency that is currently there. We also know that the Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled the country on Wednesday. He was supposed to step down, and hours before he did so, he left the country and has gone to another nation. Apparently, he's going to go to another country. From there, crisis-like situation engulfs Sri Lanka. We can see the protests that have taken over the entire country. People have entered different areas as well. The president's house was also stormed by the people on last week, on Saturday, in fact, and people are still there. People are now touring it as if it was a tourist resort. Nevertheless, there's also a huge economic crisis that has engulfed Sri Lanka. It's still there. The IMF still hasn't agreed to the terms and conditions. The money hasn't still reached Sri Lanka, although some friendly countries are helping Sri Lanka in this hour of need. To talk more about this, we've been joined by Ambassador Saqib Saab. He's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Sri Lanka, Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Wickremesinghe. How do you see Sri Lanka's future with these two personas? One has fled, the other is still there, wants to become the president.
Yes, thank you, Omar. The situation is very precarious, to say the least. But before we get surprised over this fleeing of the country. There are many instances, in the past and especially in the recent past. As you know, that the human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights actually provides for this, that on the basis of race, religion, or political opinion, you can take refuge or you can take asylum in any country. And in this case, the president has gone to Maldives. In recent past, before I come to the real issue, your viewers must know that it is not a new phenomena. In the history is replete with such instances. The kings have abdicated, and the presidents and prime minister. In the recent history, the prime minister of Macedonia, for instance, Nikola Gruevski, he went to Hungary and took asylum. Then there was this another president of, let me just quickly see, yes, the Peruvian president, Alan Garcia. He actually entered the embassy of Uruguay in his own country, Lima, the capital of Peru, and he sought asylum for that. So if you go to, Afghanistan, you will see that Ashraf Ghani, at the nick of the time, he left for Tajikistan on to UAE. So the bottom line here is that this is not a new phenomena. We have seen that when you are actually about to be ransacked or imprisoned or killed, presidents and prime ministers have fled in the past also. Now, having said that,
but Najam Saqib Sahab, this puts a country like Sri Lanka into a political turmoil, doesn't it? And now that the Prime Minister, Mr. Wickremesinghe, wants to become president, and apparently the letter for the resignation of Mr. Rajapaksa is going to reach very soon. But what is it going to lead to?
Yeah, he has already, he's not going to become the president. He's already been elected or selected as the acting president of Sri Lanka. We are talking about Wickremesinghe, and you have very rightly pointed out that the political turmoil. So right now, if you analyze the situation in Sri Lanka, there are three tiers in which you need to see this conflict. One is the crisis management, and of course, once Wickremesinghe has taken over, the militaries with him, and soon we will see that there would be a curfew there, and all those protesters, they need to be addressed, because they have ransacked the presidency. They are actually being seen playing ping pong and carom board and all that. So they are, they are having fun as such. That is not a good, good situation. So that is the first step, that these protesters have to go back home, number one. And number two, the economic crisis, not the solution, but the crisis. For instance, there are no medicines available. Hospitals.
There's no fuel, sir. There's no fuel. There's not enough medicine.
There is no fuel. You are absolutely right. And the third tier is the governance issue. And I think the acting president, Mr. Wickremesinghe, will have to work day and night to, on all these three fronts, simultaneously work. Now, all those people, if you watch the Western media or even Al Jazeera or all these television screens, they are screaming about the situation, and nobody is looking at the real thing. That how come that, a very prosperous country, Sri Lanka, which had dealt with terrorism, for instance, on its own and eliminated the menace of terrorism.
And with the help of Pakistan. It did eliminate terrorism with the help of Pakistan, sir.
Yes. How come that suddenly we saw, we are looking at a country which is at the brink of default? I think this IMF program and all these debts, cycles and all such things, which unfortunately Pakistan also finds itself embroiled in, they created that, but that is not it. The thing is that the local politicians, the local leaders, for instance, this president who has fled to Maldives, who was he? And it happened, under his nose. So we cannot say that, the Western countries or the United States of America or European Union or IMF, World Bank, etc., they were the culprits. I think it's the amalgamation, the combination of both. But the problem is right now that there are so many crises facing Colombo that it would be very, very extremely difficult. And at the moment, we can use the word impossible for the acting president to actually prevail upon this situation, especially so when he does not, enjoy the entire support of the entire people of Sri Lanka.
But sir, this said, if under the current economic situation in Sri Lanka, they cannot call for elections because this puts the government again in a more of a precarious situation economically. IMF is never going to talk to a government that is not into place. So for the moment, Wickremesinghe is the only viable option, despite the fact that he might or might not have the majority of people on his side. This said, a lot of people are protesting. They are wanting a change of the government, including the Wickremesinghe. How can the public in Sri Lanka, in your point of view, be convinced to stand down the current protest and to wait for the country to settle down economically before they can go forward with changes?
If you want to equate the people of Sri Lanka, to a large extent, you can equate them with the people of Pakistan, people of India, people of Bangladesh. We are very emotional people. And if you're talking about logic and logic should prevail, I don't think that right now the people want food. They want their motorbikes and their cars to run. They need medicine for their, children and ailing elders. So if you're talking to them about logic that, okay, we need to talk to IMF, we need to do this, this and that, there is no room for that. So I think if the acting president is wise enough, immediately something has to be done to pacify the people of Sri Lanka, to tell them that we are going to handle this situation as far, as you can see, the moment former Prime Minister was ousted in this no confidence movement, there was a lull period, there was a very confused period in which Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif took over. So at that point, the first thing is that you need to tell your people that we are here to serve you, we are here to protect you, we will give you food and medicine. Now, whether the acting president is able to do that or not, we will see. The coming weeks, especially the next 2 weeks, will be very crucial. And secondly, we need to see how the international community come to rescue the people of Sri Lanka. And I think, being a very close friend, Pakistan should also come into play. And at least some medicines and some food can be distributed among the needy people of Sri Lanka. Yes, it is a grave problem, but there are solutions. If there is a problem, there is a solution. So I think the military will have to play a very vital role, because from talking to IMF or to addressing the basic needs of the people of Sri Lanka, you need to pacify them physically first. So that is going to be the first challenge of the acting president and the military of those, that country, whether they are able to do it or not, or whether the people will take the reins in their own hands. We will see in the coming days.
All right, let's just hope that some kind of sanity prevails within the people, and the current government in Sri Lanka maneuvers in order to bring this some kind of solution to the current crisis. Nevertheless, they talk of inflation hitting 54.6% and might hit 70% in the coming months if the situation prevails. How, in your point of view, can Sri Lanka or the current government talk to A, the IMF, and B, those friendly countries who can help Sri Lanka in this hour of need?
Right now the kitty is absolutely empty. So to talk to IMF, it is not possible. The IMF officials know the situation. The funny thing is that in this situation, the IMF or, the world at large, and particularly the Western countries who can come and aid the needy people, they impose certain difficult, predicaments and situations to the people of that country, and in this case Sri Lanka, that you do these things first and then we will talk. Now this is where the real friends, they have to play their role. And Sri Lanka, I'm surprised that India is just there. India, who used to say that, Sri Lanka is a part of the Akhand Bharat and the greater India and all that. I haven't seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi announcing anything, and that would be, India should be the first country in the region to say that we are here to help you. And the another surprise is why Maldives, the ousted president chose. Why not India? So there are certain, devils in the detail. I think the world, if they need to save, salvage the situation and put the situation to rest somehow, they need the people of Sri Lanka, they need food, Omar. They need basic needs. And for about couple of weeks, I think Pakistan should take the lead, because India, Sri Lanka may it be a virus situation or even in terrorism and all that, anti-terrorist activities, Sri Lanka has been a great friend. So I think the friendly people have to come out, and, including China. What they need is the basic things to take care of. And if you're talking about the conflict resolution, I don't think that in the next 2 or 3 years there is any political or economic solution to the problem of Sri Lanka, because the things have gone very far. The joke has gone far enough to actually call that either Sri Lanka defaults, and there would be a chaos which will have its spillover, in the entire South Asian region. There will be an outflux of, people. There will be refugee issues, and of course, Pakistan will be affected too. So the countries of the region, especially China, India, Pakistan, and to some extent Iran also. And I'm sure that there must be some discussions going on that how to deal with this crisis, immediate crisis. So
I really hope that these discussions are on, Najam Saqib sir, because it's very important. Finally, you talked about the economic crisis or the political crisis not waning in the next couple of years. But in your point of view, if I was to ask you a short question, 3 major points, 3 major steps that Sri Lanka needs to take in order to come out of this situation, whether in a year or 2 years or 3 years, what would they be? As somebody who understands politics and, of course, diplomacy.
Begin with, it is always governance issue. For instance, if we see that the president who has fled from the country, there were a lot of cash with him, and around $50,000, he left it in his, in a big bag in his palace kind of a thing. Now, the thing is that if you are looting your own country, it is about the corruption that you need to take care of. It is the governance issue. The government organs, all the ministries, they need to be working properly. So this is in your hand. Secondly, you have to, cut down your expenditure. You cannot spend more than what you earn. And in this situation, when the people are not ready even to pay taxes, so it is going to be a humongous task to ask them for, paying their taxes. So number 1 is governance. Number 2 is you have to cut your expenditure on all the government organs. Number 3 is that sanity has to prevail political side. In the political domain, people of Sri Lanka should be given a chance, if not through elections, at least there should be someone who should lead it, head of state, the de jure, ruler of Sri Lanka. People should have confidence in him. And then you give about 6 months to 1 year to salvage the situation. And then after taking these 3 steps that you are asking, then actually they need reforms. That how are we going to live in this country called Sri Lanka? How are we going to deal with our foreign policy and internal policy? And for that, Omar, I think we should wish good luck to Sri Lanka, because right now it is all darkness even at the end of the tunnel. there is darkness. But, let me finish with this happy note that people of Sri Lanka, like people of Pakistan, they are resilient people. And I think if there is a leader at the helm of affairs in whom the people of Sri Lanka trust, they can rise from the ashes. And that's
all right. Thank you very much, Najam Saqib Saab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the crisis in Sri Lanka, the way to come out of it, and of course how Sri Lanka is embroiled, whether politically, economically, or otherwise, in different issues that the people are of course confronted with, the daily lives of people are confronted with. Let's hope that some kind of solution comes out in the next few days. Pakistan has been a very good friend to Sri Lanka and will continue to be one. Let's come to our last two stories. The first is about Washington and of course the James Webb telescope that has shown the different sides of the galaxies that we have never ever seen before. On Monday, Webb revealed the clearest image of day to the early universe going back 13 billion years. The first batch of full color high resolution pictures, which took weeks to render from raw telescope data, were selected by NASA to provide compelling early images from the Webb's major areas of inquiry and a preview of science missions ahead. Also on Tuesday, there was more shots of other galaxies that were shown, whether it be the Carina Nebula, whether it be Southern Ring Nebula and others. And this is a beautiful, discovery for mankind. We now in Earth can see so many other galaxies and so many other planets that could be inhabitable, that resemble the Earth, and the beauty of these galaxies that has been enriched through these photographs of NASA, which were of course inaugurated by Joe Biden, the President of the United States of America. The galaxy, the universe, is indeed a wonderful, a stupendous, beautiful area. The more you discover, the more you find new things. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19. We have been talking about it more or less last week as well and before as well, although the positivity ratio as of today, as per the NIH, is around 1.55%. Nevertheless, the number of cases is increasing, and the WHO head also talks about COVID-19. He says he's worried that the numbers are shooting up and this is going to put more strain on the health systems and the workers. He cites different countries across the world where the number of cases are increasing. Therefore, we need to be vigilant in Pakistan as well. We have already taken a lot of care for our people in the past. We can do so now, not only as a community, but as individuals as well, as societies as well. Follow the SOPs, wear the masks, get yourselves vaccinated if you are old or vulnerable or are immunocompromised with your second booster shot, and also avoid crowded places. This is how we can confront COVID-19. This is how we can beat it. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.